Be part of Sakatoga Stable's next great story. Sakatoga Stable, home of Funny Side and Tis the Law, has shares available in our current yearlings. Get on the bus at sakatoga.com. Peter Thomas Fornatal back with you on the In the Money YouTube channel here from Del Mar. And we are bringing in the most popular guest that we ever bring in here on In the Money. They come to us courtesy of our friends over at NBC Sports, where you can watch all of the Breeders' Cup races in various formats. You can watch it all as well on Peacock in one place through the Breeders' Cup feeds. The men who will be a huge part of all that coverage who join us once again. It is the Bailey and Moss Show. Jerry Bailey and Randy Moss. Gentlemen, how are you? Where are you?
We are deep in the bowels of the NBC production
compound.
Yeah, here we just got a text from a friend that said, "What are you guys doing?" And I said, "Well, right now we're trying to swim to the surface and get our heads above water on Thursday." That's kind of.
But we arrived Monday, Pete. But we've been working on this probably for, if you really want to get technical about it, for several months, and in earnest for several weeks before we get here.
It's one of these things where my wife is like, "So how's it going?" This is when I'm back home, and I'm like, "Oh my, great! I'm way ahead of the game." And then you get here, and I wish I had 2 extra days. Yeah. But,
Can't wait to hear your thoughts on all these races. We'll start with one that we've already previewed on these airwaves, but the picture has changed a little bit over the course of these last 10 days. Talking, of course, about the Breeders' Cup Classic. Jerry, I'll ask you this one for starters. At this point, are we comfortable calling Sovereignty the greatest what-if horse of all time?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, what if for several reasons? What if he'd have run in the Preakness? Would he have won the Triple Crown? What if he'd have didn't get sick and run in the Classic? Would he have swept it this year? I mean, to me, he was going to be my pick. He was the fastest horse in the race. And it's still a great race. It does not change. His defection does not change the way the race will unfold, in my opinion. But it's sad not to have it.
And hopefully, as we tape this, it's Thursday morning, and the vets are still making their rounds, and hopefully we can keep the rest of the Classic field perfectly intact. That's always a question mark, but right now it's still a really good race.
Are we still comfortable calling it the best Classic of the century, or has that luster gone away, Randy?
I wasn't sure anyway, even with Sovereignty. It was of the century. Okay, you're talking about 2000 on. Okay, so I could make that statement and I'd be okay with it. It's the 98 Classic that I keep going back to that everybody tries to compare it to. But, it's still a fantastic race. Like going in to the Breeders' Cup this year, only once in the history of the Breeders' Cup, 41 years previous runnings, have the 1, 2, 3 finishers of the Classic come back and all run in the Classic the next year. Only once in the history of the Breeders' Cup had the 1, 2, 3 finishers in the Kentucky Derby come back and run that same year in the Breeders' Cup. And we were going to get them both at once. I mean, the odds are like 1,700 to 1 based on the previous stats for that to happen. But it's still, it's still a heck of a race.
Let's pivot to the betting on the Classic. And Jerry, I'll throw the ball back in your court because your top pick for sure in here was going to be Sovereignty. You said with him out, who does that open it up to?
Well, a horse that I had in the top 5 anyway, for me, Forever Young. He's the most interesting horse in the race. I believe if Mr. Moss's pace figures are right, that he has run faster than any horse this year on the dirt in the Saudi Cup. It was a very impressive win, even though he probably wasn't the best horse that day. Romantic Warrior was. But he ran so well last year, being close to a really fast pace, all the traveling he did, all the racing he did around the globe. He's had more of a muted schedule this year, a lot of rest coming in here with one just minor prep. He's tactical. I like him slightly the best.
How's this for a role reversal, Pete? We've got Jerry talking about the Japanese horse. How about that,
I was going to make the same joke. Of all the shows I've been lucky enough to do with you now, if you were to ask me which one was going to pick the Japanese horse, it would have been, Moss 1 to 9.
And I think it's a good pick. I mean, but Fierceness to me is still the horse to beat, I guess. Here's the thing about Forever Young. If he runs a Saudi Cup race back, it's game, set, match. It's over. I mean, he ran an unbelievable, not as good as Romantic Warrior, but he ran an unbelievable race in the Saudi Cup, and it seemed to affect him. And there was some other pre-race shenanigans going on in Dubai with quarantine and all that affected him as well in the Dubai World Cup. He had that little prep in Japan. Who the heck knows how good or bad that was, but he won. If he's back to the Saudi Cup, he wins. But last year in the Classic, Jerry has a little bit of an issue with the way he was ridden.
Yeah, I think he was too close to a fast pace.
Yeah.
You're talking about Forever Young?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we envision in the way the race is developing, Pete, is of course the pacemaker, contrary thinking, if he's still permitted to run, blasting off and not completely blasting off, but setting the pace, and Fierceness probably stalking. And I would guess Forever Young maybe a length or so outside Fierceness, tracking Fierceness and making Fierceness his target in a perfect world. I think Fierceness is still maybe slightly the horse to beat, but to me, it comes down to those two.
What figure, Randy, if this is information you're comfortable sharing publicly, if you were to estimate a buyer's speed figure for the Saudi Cup run for Forever Young?
118.
Shoo! Yeah, that's the best. That's the best race on offer. Even with Sovereignty in the race, that would be the best race on offer. What of the draw for Fierceness, Jerry? The Connections made a bit of a deal that they did not want the rail. The rail the last year or so in these meets at Del Mar, it hasn't been great on dirt. Is it a concern for Fierceness for you?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they would rather draw further out, but if you're not going to break and run well the first 2 or 3 jumps, I'd rather be in the one than between horses, because you're not going to get sandwiched. You have a little bit of a leeway. You have some room to make it up, which last out in the Pacific Classic, you remember he ducked in the rail. I don't think that's going to happen again. If I were John Velasquez, I would leave the gate with the whip in my left hand just to nudge him a little bit on his left shoulder to remind him he's going to go straight. But I doubt that will happen again, having gone through it once already. And I think, like Randy, I think he's going to be closest to the rabbit. I think he has a clear second, going into by the wire the first time and around the first turn with Forever Young lapped on him. My question is, who was he beating in the Pacific Classic? I think many people would agree that Journalism was a pretty tired horse by that point. So actually, who was Fierceness beating when he won the Pacific Classic? Any way you dice it, if you think Journalism was what he was middle of the year, he's still going to have to run faster to beat these.
Yeah. I thought Journalism was a tired horse in both the Haskell and the Pacific Classic. He won the Haskell anyway just because of his determination. But, Gosker's a nice horse, but you don't see him in the Classic. And as far as Fierceness goes, to me, Pete, there's way too much belly aching in this country among horsemen about the number one post position. And there's not as much emphasis as there should be about saving ground, about the advantages of the number one post position. To me, the only drawback for Fierceness getting the one hole is what he did in the Pacific Classic. Will that happen again? Same distance, same track, same visual. That's it. But you think that's doubtful?
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen. And Pete, look, what if Fierceness drew 14 or 12? Where's he going to end up by the first turn? Close to the rail.
Yeah.
So, you save all that nonsense about having to get yourself over and clear, and you save horse and you're there.
The debate that we've had, Pete, back and forth here, and maybe it'll be on the telecast as well, is what the impact of contrary thinking is going to be specifically on Fierceness.
I think none. To me, the only way I get, as a jockey, way I get wrapped up and concerned about a rabbit is if he actually has a chance to win. Then I have to keep him honest. I have to stay close enough to where he doesn't get away with anything easy. This horse contrary thinking, has almost no chance of winning. So if I'm Johnny, I'm going to ride like he's not even in there. Yeah. Just worry about the horses back behind me and worry about the pace of Fierceness through the early part of the race. That's all.
To me, he automatically has an impact, because we were talking for the previous 2 or 3 weeks about how big of an advantage Fierceness was going to have in the Classic with no other speed to compete with him. He was going to get out there, set the pace, slow it down, get brave, right? We've seen front runners on the dirt and even the turf, but especially the dirt, get the lead and the confidence swells and they back it up and all that. Just by the presence of contrary thinking, that goes away. And so he loses a potential big advantage that he might have had otherwise. That doesn't mean he can't win. We saw in the Pacific Classic, we've seen another race. He doesn't have to have the lead to win. He's not a one-dimensional speed horse, but he loses a potential major advantage, in my opinion.
Let's move on to some other races. We can speed round this a little bit because I know you guys have a lot to do. But if I were to ask you each to pick one spot, we'll start with Saturday since we just talked about the Classic. The next most interesting race to you, Randy, would be?
From a standout perspective, betting horse.
Let's do it from a horse you'd want to build around in some betting opportunities.
Ben Tornato in the sprint. I didn't particularly like Straight No Chaser's comeback race. I didn't think it was nearly as good as his comeback race in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship the year before. I'm not sold on Copion, especially from the number one post position. To me, Ben Tornato pretty much lays over the field based on his most recent race, his only recent race at Churchill Downs.
I'll only push back because I'm just very curious here what you say. We were just talking about, Horseman Bellyache about the one post. Copion has these gaudy buyer speed figures, 3 of the last 4 starts. What's wrong with the rail draw for her specifically?
I probably put too much emphasis on it, Pete, but she's not a real speed horse, and at 3/4 of a mile, especially, I think she's going to be mid-pack. And I don't recall her being in a situation where she's tucked in on the rail and she's got horses surrounding her and all that. She has come from well off the pace before. She did it at Churchill Downs. I think she was 6th or something like that when she won the prep at Churchill. I think she was outside. That's the only thing. But yeah, I just don't think she's as fast as Ben Tornato, basically.
The problem with an inside post sprinting, Pete, is if you don't break and run well, you run the risk of almost the entire field collapsing in around you, and it just makes it more difficult to get through traffic. It's just a harder race on horses.
Jerry, what's another race you're really looking forward to on Saturday from any perspective?
Well,
Hope Road. That's your
Hope Road in the Filly Mare Sprint is my best bet of I think she gets the perfect trip. She's as fast or faster than any filly in there. So I would single her if I had to single her in a ticket. But I mean, the dirt mile's great. I want to see Nisos. Is he that good? Is he what I thought he was, earlier in the year? The turf is awesome. You have Rebels Romance going for a 3rd Breeders' Cup win against Mini Hawk, arguably maybe the best horse in the ARC. She finished 2nd. So there's so many.
Look, I love a superfecta in the turf. All you got to do, in my opinion, is you just got to play Rebels Romance and Mini Hawk on top, right? Goliath. Over Amalok, over both Gold Phoenix and Goliath.
I love it.
There you go.
One more Saturday question, then I'll ask you that same question about Friday. But I'm just curious, you mentioned getting here early in the week. Is there a horse on whom your opinion has changed based on something you saw or heard at your time in California, Jerry?
Yeah, Seismic Beauty. Yeah, I thought she was a lock. On paper, she looks to control the pace. She loves Del Mar. That was her fastest career effort when she ran down here and won easily on the lead. I thought she was an overlay. But from what we've heard, she doesn't physically look like she did back in the summer. So that would change my mind.
And on paper, I've gone back and looked. I had the same opinion. We both had the same opinion about her when we got here. And I've done a little bit more pace stuff and on paper and all that. And in those races at Del Mar, basically it was the Baffert show. I mean, one of them was against Splendora, a stablemate, and who wasn't going to hook her. Ricci was in the other one with Royal Spa. They weren't fast enough to hook her. They were going to hook her, Baffert on Baffert. So she was just out there winging it. Now you got Jin inside of her. You got another horse in there that might press her enough to set it up for a horse like Darth Vader, for example, who I think Jerry and I both like.
Yeah.
Anything
else? It's a pretty weak edition of the distaff, to be honest.
Anything else that you heard from the grounds or saw in person this week, or should we move on to Friday?
I heard Sovereignty's not doing too well.
Yeah, he's got a fever. Usually when people say it's a fever in the knee. But with Sovereignty, it's I think just actually a virus.
An actual proper fever. I mentioned the NBC plugs before. For much more from you guys and your fantastic team, Peacock, that's a place you can watch the whole thing. Obviously, check local listings. You can see the channels. But if you guys wanted to give me any more specifics on the coverage and where people can find you, we might as well do it now.
Well, I know Randy's going to defer to me, and I
Go
don't
ahead,
know.
Jerry.
And I have it on a schedule here, but
We start off on USA both days.
yeah.
Okay.
And then it transitions at some point to NBC. And then for the final race.
Not on Friday, though. Friday it stays on.
Friday it stays on USA,
until Peacock.
Until the last race, the juvenile turf, then it goes to Peacock.
Peacock only.
Yeah.
Saturday we start on USA and Peacock. We transition to, at the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, I believe, to NBC. We stay on that till after the Classic, and it transitions back to USA for the mile, the dirt mile, and we go to Peacock for the filly and mare turf.
If you're okay with Peacock, leave it on Peacock the whole time.
That's what I was going to say. It's worth the subscription anyway, and then you get the opportunity to not have to flick any channels. It's great stuff. All right, Friday at the Breeders' Cup, Future Stars Friday, same gimmick. One race you're the most looking forward to from any perspective you choose. You know, Randy, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire for a betting answer to that question. But Jerry, is there a standout to you in terms of just a race you're really looking forward to, or something that might be wagering value?
As always, has no wagering value at all. As always, I always love to see the 2-year-old colts heading for the Derby next year. And you have Brant and Ted Nafi. You have East against West. And I'm leaning toward Ted Nafi. Even though Brant's run faster, I don't like 2-year-olds that run a triple-digit buyer their first out. To me, more often than not, 2-year-olds never run back to that. Brant, for whatever reason, didn't run close to that his second race. Is that him? Does he run a 101 and win? Or does Ted Nafi, who's run slightly slower than that, keep progressing? I like Ted Nafi.
Yeah, and I would give the advantage over Brant just because I think he's going to set the pace. But hey, look, first of all, let's quickly talk about the Aidan O'Brien factor here, right? I mean, he's got these 3 horses, True Love, Precise, and Stad, who just look like absolute standouts on paper, and they roughed up Aidan pretty badly at the post position draw. Yeah. I think it's going to be okay for True Love. And I think it's going to be, honestly, I think it's going to be okay for Precise.
She drops out the back.
Who breaks from post 13, which is a horrible post, as we know, going a mile. But she won her most recent prep over there, coming from last place. So she's going to just drop out the back, move over, and then probably just run them all down. Stad has more of a problem. It's not necessarily that 14 is worse than 13. It's his running style and the fact that he's already – distance is a bit of a question mark for him. He tends to get aggressive in the early part of his races.
And they like to be covered up.
Yeah.
And that's his only chance of semi-relaxing is to being covered up. And that's almost an impossible job unless you just miss the break on purpose and drop him over. And then you don't know how he's going to react.
And he's going to be, I think, a pretty solid favorite in there. So that's, from a betting perspective, I think that's a pretty good race to take a shot against the favorite. But then the problem becomes the Americans are just like a mixed bag.
They're not solid.
Yeah, they're not really solid at all. So,
and you also have to factor in, Pete, a horse like Stad, he's never run left-handed. Right. So not only is he going to try and be a little over-aggressive, breaking from the 14 pole, he's never been around a left-handed turn, which comes up really quickly.
Yeah, Argos is okay. Botas is okay. Street Beast.
That's, to me, that's the horse that might be 5, 6, 8 to 1. He gets a great trip, and I think he's better than a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff, guys.
Also, one other little small handicapping point that we've been talking about this morning. The juvenile fillies, not a particularly good race. Explora is deserving favorite on paper. And everybody's kind of down, as I think we were when we got here, on Tommy Joe after the Alcibiades disappointment, right? But when you think about it, she was overly aggressive in the Alcibiades. She was too keen when they were trying to keep her off the pace, which was set by Percy's Bar in the Alcibiades around the first turn. The more I look at this, the more I think they're just going to say, screw rating her. We're just going to blast off and going to set the pace and then get her to relax a little bit, not try to restrain her that much. And you could see the same Tommy Joe that people thought they were seeing going into the Alcibiades, and
And-
she'll be a lot better price.
And I don't blame them for trying to rate her at Keeneland in the Alcibiades. That's what you're going to try and do to see if she'll settle and make her a better filly going long. But if you're not going to get a punch on the end by wrestling with a horse early, then just let him go.
Fantastic.
And they got no punch. Even though he tried to restrain her and save her, she had nothing left in the middle of the stretch.
Yeah, I was wondering if it wasn't a question of distance, but you make a great point. Maybe ridden a different way, it could be a very different result. Certainly the one that looks the best on the figures, but we'll see how it plays out. I was wondering if we couldn't get a big price in there. Either of you have any wild ideas in the juvenile fillies?
What's going to happen? They'll hustle her to the lead now. She'll get involved in a head-to-head speed duel, and she'll back up anyway. But anyway. Price, I would say
Iron Orchard. I mean,
Iron Orchard.
She figures. She's as fast. Her numbers wise, she's as fast as anybody in there.
Yeah.
Except Explora.
I agree.
And you're going to get beat down on the price with Explora. So.
And you'll save ground on the first turn. So yeah.
Could be a big weekend for the New York breds out here at the Breeders' Cup. Jerry, Randy, thank you so much for doing this. Really looking forward to watching you guys on NBC all weekend long. Thanks to everybody out there for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel for more great horse racing content.